ICLI platform, we have been coming across different topics that rarely are talked in the mosques, and we just are aware of those things. Our program actually is meant for a dialogue. That's another thing which is rare. Most of the time it is speeches, so people just listen passively, they take few things, but we want to initiate the dialogue. The Muslim, especially the Muslim youth, are not accustomed to having dialogues. So the way this program is that after we go over this dialogue with our guest, then we open the forum to people so that they can ask openly. No question is small or stupid. We can just ask the questions because we learn from questioning. Today's program is something which is very close to my heart because the young people, they are coming across, they are encountering such ideas that perhaps there is no God, no Allah exist. And this is basically the humans have created God to console themselves, to just fill their voids. Since this kind of thought is coming from the modern science and technology areas, and the word is in the hands of the word's leadership is in the hands of those people, naturally it is going to affect everywhere our young generation. One is that one goes through these phases and then outgrows from these thoughts and deviations, but that there are people who are getting fixed into it. Recently, I got some videos of ex-Muslims, and that was very alarming. And nowadays, the way the information and misinformation superhighway is that even though the number of certain ideas, number of people following certain ideas are very small, they can organize and they can affect and create a trend. So our today's topic is atheism and our young Muslims. And fortunately, we have someone who can address this very nicely, and someone who can explain it a little better because he has gone through different phases. Our Sheikh Gyasi Mckinzie. Thank you and Jazakallah, Sheikh, joining us. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me this honor.
Thank you. So Sheikh Gyasi Mckinzie was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. He reverted to Islam when he was in high school, a very young age. That is the time when a person goes through this bombardment of thoughts. I mean, there is hormonal surge, there are revolting brain. But the fitra, the somebody who is on the right fitra, they look for the truth. And mashallah, Sheikh got the truth and then goes through different phases and then graduate from Islamic University of Medina. And after coming here, he also joined and got the graduation master degree in Vanderbilt University in theological studies, remained in different situations and different institutions as a instructor, as teacher, professor, in being in leadership role, Sheikh, mashallah. And now currently he's located in Dallas, where the Muslim society is mashallah growing and getting organized, which is one thing which is very deficient in all other areas in USA particularly, that we are not very well organized. We are just living in our pockets. But mashallah, in Dallas and Houston, Muslims are very well organized. So Sheikh, if something is left from your introduction, can you please enlighten our audience about yourself?
You didn't leave out much, mashallah. As you mentioned, I became Muslim at the age of 16. And you are right. Usually at the 11th grade, 12th grade, or right in college is when people began to question themselves about the purpose of life, about turning to God, because now you're more independent and you begin to get bills and more stress and things become on you. So I agree with you with that. So that's pretty much my story in terms of becoming Muslim. Then also, maybe I should just highlight that I came from a very religious background. We were being from the South, devout Christians. So I always had a connection with a strong faith. But alhamdulillah, and at the age of 16, I was able to be exposed to Islam and saw that it was the truth. And alhamdulillah.
Sheikh, would you like to share how you were exposed to Islam? I mean, that's always like, gives us a strength.
No, you're right. I love conversion stories. I don't have the most beautiful conversion story, but I have no problem with sharing with you. Again, I was very young, and this is around 1990. So there are very few Muslims in Memphis, and I knew very little about Islam, very, very little about Islam. However, our teacher asked us to review, research, and submit an essay on one of the world's great religions. And for some reason, I chose Islam, and for some reason, Islam appealed to me. And we had one Muslim in my school that I was aware of. It was a girl who was 1 year older than me. And she told me, I asked her a little bit about Islam. I think she thought maybe I was hitting on her. I was trying to flirt with her. She was a very beautiful girl. So that wasn't the case, but she introduced me to her brother and her father. And the masjid, we only had 2 masjids at that time, maybe 3, in the whole city of Memphis. And the masjid was only a mile or 2 from my school. So it was walking distance. So subhanAllah, had that masjid not been there, Allah knows best my story, or had I not had a classmate who was Muslim, Allah knows best how it would have turned out. But basically, I met with her father just for maybe an hour and a half, and that was it. So 16 years of my life, then, and we come from a very devout, like I said, practicing Christian family. But it only took like an hour and a half to be convinced that, wow, this is the truth. So after doing the essay and after speaking to her father, I decided to accept Islam.
That's excellent. That's wonderful. Very fascinating, actually. I mean, to you, it may not look fascinating, but for us who are born Muslims,
right,
we feel that so many millions of people around the world with good fitrah are surrounding. It's only our deficiency.
Right.
We don't come across with them like that.
Right. So maybe one more point, and this may be helpful, and maybe a segue into today's topic, is when I look back, I actually am somewhat scared because I said, subhanAllah, what was it that really made me Muslim? And it was so difficult in that time because Muslims was truly the minority, and there was very few Muslims. And the Muslims, my city was predominantly all black and white town too. So the Muslims that I was exposed to, first of all, it was at the university that was close to my school, and they were all from different parts of the world, and I didn't have that exposure. However, what appealed to me is the logical arguments of the Quran. What appeals to me that God is one, God is not a man. What appealed to me was the rational arguments of the Quran. And, I think also this is one of the best arguments against atheism, is that I would argue that we are naturally inclined to believe that there is something greater than us. So that's primarily what made me inclined towards Islam, was just it made sense. And people always say that. And especially, I would just mention one other point in Christianity where I was coming from. One of the main beliefs was the Trinity. And basically we were told, just believe 1 + 1 + 1 is 1. And with Islam, everything just really made sense. And you see so many converts saying that it made sense. Even Salman al-Farsi, rahimahullah, when he was a devout Zoroastrian, and his father was the chief, and they were responsible for burning the fire, and he just had exposure, and everyone was Zoroastrian and during his time, but his exposure to a monk for just a few moments of the day or a few hours, we don't know, he also became Muslim. So this is something that you see quite a bit. You see rabbis, pastors, preachers who lived a life of devotion. I mean, when they see Islam, because of this rationale, because of how it makes sense and how it appeals to, I would say, humanity, people embrace Islam quite quickly. Like I said, for me, it was only just an hour and a half to Allahu Akbar.
That's great. So, Sheikh Mckinzie, can we go over different kind of atheism or define atheism, how it creeps into a young person's mind as far as the definition is concerned?
Right. Just keeping it very, very simple. Atheism, and it's beginning to spread even more. And it's a little maybe different than the causes of atheism now. So maybe slightly different. But what I want to address is just to believe that there is no creator, no God, no design, and that we have, and in essence, no purpose as well. And nowadays, in this atheism, you had in different parts of the world, and for there and different eras of time. I mean, so it's not a new thing. However, it seems to be more radical now, and people are much more aggressive with this belief that there is no God.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I could understand is that humans are given the conscious of choosing between good and evil, khair and shar. And
Right.
wherever there is a choice, when you're given the choice, there will be some deviations. So
Right.
throughout the human history, people
Right.
will be doing it. But in the current era, the atheism actually originated from basically those areas which were Christian. And since you're right, since the Christians say, just believe, they
Right.
want to suppress the intellect or intellectual questions. As a result, when they got progress in this material progress, when they took off the shackles of Christianity out of them, they said, okay, let's separate them. And that reinforces the behavior of thoughts that perhaps there is no God. And then the rationality, they presented rationality versus religion.
Right. So, I mean, this is a wonderful point, and you would see that the main arguments for atheism are not these very deep philosophical arguments. You hit on one of the main arguments, and you will, even if you just do a quick search, you'll see people will say, I mistrust or I have a disdain for organized religion. I just don't believe in it. It's I see eras in the Bible, and you mentioned Christians in general, and I see fables and myths and fairy tales, it seems like. And so that is what pushed many people to atheism, because for many people it was just a choice between Christianity or nothing. So it pushed many people into atheism, and I can understand that. And as a matter of fact, I studied at the divinity school in Vanderbilt. It wasn't a denominational or a school in which, a devotional school in which you actually practice, but rather it was just an educational setting. But many people who go to seminaries and they discover certain discrepancies in the Bible and different things, and this is what we were told, they have a moment to either just believe, or they um, usually escape to or go towards atheism. So mistrust in organized religion is the main one of the main reasons for the new age atheism.
That's right. Another thing which I came across when I was in medical college, there was a group of medical students, and they would be like that. It's a
Mm.
special group, and they would ask me a few questions. One of the questions was, "What is happening in the world?
Mm.
The chaos, the conflicts, the human wars, and suffering and disease." And they say, "Look, if your God is so Rahman and Rahim, what is happening this? Uh,
Right.
how can you explain this?" So that's a question at the rationality base when they present it, and especially they say, okay, you can say that the wars and conflicts are because of human faults. How about a child who is born blind and mentally handicapped and physically handicapped, an autistic child, and their parents are suffering? Why this suffering?
Right. No, that's a very beautiful question, and a very common question that is posed to our youth many times. The question of evil. So, if God is so loving, compassionate, why are these things happening? Or is a God all powerful? He's not able to. He is all compassionate, but he's not all powerful. So this is the argument, and this really baffled or stifled the growth in Christianity. However, in Islam, this wasn't really the big philosophical argument or problem that it was in Christianity and in the West in general. So Islam, it mentions, addresses this issue head on throughout the Quran and throughout the Ahadith, basically by saying that we are interpreting this suffering or this pain as something bad, but it is an opportunity to grow. Even in looking at atheism and in looking at this argument, all we have to do is just look at our lives. Even our lives, if we were just given something, I'm sure you becoming a medical doctor was something that was difficult and something that people admire, and you have a certain status because of that. But if you were just given your certificate with, within one day, your not certificate, but your medical degree, and there was no hardship, then it would hold no value. And they say no pain, no gain. And we wouldn't even be entertained by in sports if you just win and there was no challenges or competition. That's part of the sweetness of life, and going through those challenges and still ending up a champion, like different, just keeping with the sports analogy, those people who played through an injury or they played through so much adversity and yet came out on top. Likewise is life. You may have lost a loved one or lost some property due to natural disasters or what happened. But those things forge powerful, strong human beings and strong faith and strong, good, upright citizens. So those are good things overall. And the only pure evil or bad thing is to end up to live this life and end up not making it to paradise. You had this great opportunity to make it to a land which you can have whatever you want. Your fantasies can become realities, your dreams become true. No more pain, no more suffering, no more ills, and this land has no end. And so to miss out from that's bad.
That's right.
That's bad. And we say the statement, it's all good. It's all good. So even we understand that these things that may be setbacks are actually can make us stronger and better human beings. If we don't go through those challenges, if a doctor never see these difficult situations, he will not grow. and you would not want to go to him when you do
That's
have
right.
your challenges.
That's right.
But
No, exactly. Thank you, Sheikh. I mean, this is what I figured it out when I became also a student of Deen. Being a
inshallah,
student of medicine was not that a big deal, but being a student of Deen becomes really opening the eyes.
mashallah,
And what I noticed that before denying the existence of God, before saying the existence of God, mostly people don't believe in hereafter, the akhirah. And that is because not understanding the scheme on which Allah has created this life, that this life is temporary.
right,
And once you look in the paradigm and prism of test to this life, then all these things looks actually perfect. This is a perfect word for test. But if you deny that it's not test, this is the all decades we have, this is all few years we have, then definitely that will end up in atheism. So if the right paradigm of this life is done, then we خلق الحياة والموت ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا.
right, exactly. But even that's a very logical conclusion. Everything in life has, we're doing it for some type of reward, and and that's what we. There's consequences. So if you run a red light, there's consequences. You do good, there's consequences. You work hard. So overall, we live this whole life and there's no consequence. That is illogical because everything we tell our kids, do this because this, do this because of that, don't do this because of this, don't do that. So it's only logical that at the end of this life in which we're told that there's consequences and that we should be judged. Everyone agrees that if you don't work hard, you shouldn't be given a medical degree. You shouldn't be able to fly a plane. I mean, you have to work for everything in this life. And likewise, this whole lifetime is going to be judged. And it just doesn't stop when life is over. So what I'm trying to say is the concept of consequences to our action, like you said, and sort of the beginning of Surah Tabarak, Surah Al-Mulk, Allah says that He has created us to see which of us are best in performing deeds, and these are things that we admire, even as human beings. Universally, we admire people who do good, heroes, especially during this pandemic. People admire them, and these are atheists too. So if you do good, but there's no reward for it with Allah, or there's no akhirah. Also, what is the true motivation to do good?
That's right.
Why? Because if you do good and you work, you go the hard way, and yet someone can take what you have and you could die at any moment, it doesn't make sense. And as a matter of fact, there was a saying when I was young, people would say good is stupid or dumb because if you don't believe in God, if there's no hereafter, it actually does make sense that you're trying hard. You might as well cheat. You might as well break the system because you only live once, as they say, and it's only you don't know even when you're going to be removed from this life. So to do good, there's no true motivation. In this life, we are motivated. The same atheists, they will motivate you when you take the test. They will motivate you and tell you there's consequences. Likewise, to life in general, there are consequences. Otherwise, there's no true motivation to do good. And one point, I used to serve as a chaplain in the prison system, and many prisoners who would do bad, who were atheists, would say, I knew that was wrong, but hey, I was taught that I'm a product of nature and not a product of God. So, it only makes sense for me to try to get over, as they say. So this is one of the, and overall, I want to try to make this point to the youth, and we can flesh out these points later, that atheism is quite depressing. And many times when you listen to these different interviews and documentaries, it's very depressing. One is that you could do all this good, and yet you live a good life, but yet it doesn't pay off at the end in reality. And a lot of times the people who do good, they want to, getting injured or hurt or prison falsely. Remember, there's so many good people done good things, but they weren't rewarded in this life. Maybe even they weren't even admired. People don't know their stories. But, to believe that there is a reward, something that's very easy it's not a long jump for us, is very encouraging, motivating, and it's a very optimistic viewpoint, unlike the other.
So we can say that at intellectual level, one reason of atheism is basically not understanding the real paradigm of this life.
Sure.
And its end. What would happen after that? Denial of akhirah. And that's why I wonder that why so many times, every page of the Quran, there is some mentioning of akhirah.
Right.
Somehow Allah knew, naturally Allah knows, that the humans can deviate if they don't believe in akhirah.
Right.
And the other intellectual reasons they present actually is how their life was created. And somehow they have in a fancy word that since they have a long development of science and technology, either they have answered the question how life was created, or it will be answered soon.
Right.
Well, as far as I know, I studied science in all ways, and not just as a medical graduate, but also as a student of Deen.
Right.
Because I was like in the bridge, and I found that nothing has been discovered that can explain how the material itself to begin with was created, and how then from material to life was created, and from life to conscious was created. I mean, there are certain weak links. They make it like a big thing, but otherwise, really, they don't have the answer of that question.
No, you're right. And many students of atheism and their scholars, what have you, who are truthful, will say, no, we don't have those answers. And we probably will never have those answers. Many will say that. But yet, at the same time, they'll say, but you can't prove to me there is a God. Show me your God. And, I believe in science. Science is factual. I can see it. I can prove it, even though science does change. And things that we knew, we are steadily changing, which is very interesting. But however, they put all their eggs in the basket of science. And you're right. There are certain gaps. And many of them, the ones who are truthful, which I think many of them who are really dedicated to the discipline of science will say, yes, there are holes. These are just theories. This makes sense, but we don't know. Which brings me to another conclusion, and that is that atheism is a huge gamble, especially for those who admit that there are holes. And maybe we should clear up. Agnostics are those who say, well, I don't know. There may be a God. There may not be a God. However, atheists, they're the ones who say there is no God. However, if they take that path and live their life as if there's no God and there is a God, they're in trouble. Yep. However, if they just live their life, there's no harm of it, live their life and really truly believed in a God, then there's nothing to lose. But and that logic doesn't make sense, because they will say, and even people who say you can just live anyway. I mean, Islam is not the way, but if we say Islam is the way, Allah tells us how to get to paradise. We don't say who will make it and who won't, but Allah tells us how to do it. Follow this roadmap. This is better, because this roadmap says it's the only roadmap. This one is from the divine. Your roadmap, you're saying it will lead you, and you can follow any roadmap. Then the most safe thing to do is to follow the one that says that it will lead you there. It's the exclusive one, because you already admitted, that any road will lead you to paradise. For those who, I'm just saying, who do believe in God, like who are agnostic, but yes, that don't believe. Those who are like deists, those who believe in a God, but believe that God doesn't intervene. So there's a God, but we just will live life. But let me step back, so I won't, because I may be confusing some of the viewers. But my point is, going back to my original point, is that it is safer to be a believer than it is to be an atheist. That's all I'm trying to say.
Thank you. And I think other than these two reasons at intellectual level, that the denial of akhira and not understanding the real prism and paradigm of this life as the scheme on which it was created by Allah,
Right.
and then making living in a fancy world that perhaps we have answered those questions, which the true scientists would admit that they
Right. Sure.
won't.
Right.
But the third reason I see in atheism, why it is becoming so progressively going higher, especially in the young generation, is the political. Somehow, thousands of years before, anywhere in the world, the political power was in the hands who were somehow linked to spirituality. Like, in the West, the Roman Empire had marriage with Catholic Church. In Islamic area, there was caliphate, and then the India and all the Far East area, there was Buddhism and Hinduism. Somehow this is the first time in the human history when the political leadership, the superpower, the power is in the hands of those who are based on this premise that there is no life after death. Practically they believe in that, and
Right.
there is a political power in them. Anybody who moves towards atheism automatically becomes a hero.
Right. Now, very true. And you see this more pronounced in Europe than you do in America. America has the separation of church and state, which has weakened belief in God in general. But in Europe, it is even more pronounced, as you mentioned. And many of the people who may have power or influence, political power, are those who don't believe in God at all. You're right.
But now let's come to the Muslim generation, Muslim young people, because I personally think when I meet those young people, and I have met a lot, and I'm sure that you might have met few of them too, that the Muslim young person doesn't become atheist because of this philosophical and rationalism. There is something behind them, maybe a psychological trauma in the childhood. Maybe they are looking at the problems, contradictions, a bad parenthood, the parenting, and then they become angry on God. And the best expression of anger is just to deny his existence.
Right.
I mean, the
Right.
real story is more emotional and psychological than really rational. These rational
Right.
things comes later.
Right. No, you make a very good point because you started off with how the Christians get pushed to atheism, and this is how Muslims get pushed to atheism. And you can hear some of their stories or read some of their stories, and many times it is what, as you said, in their family they had people who were irreligious or used the religion incorrectly. They were radical. They mixed culture with Islam, so they thought honor killings were great, and they saw the wrong image of Islam, and so it pushed them to atheism, just like Christianity has also the bad representation, and the belief is getting watered down and more secular, and so it pushed them to atheism as well. So I do agree with you. And one other point, and it's a lack of knowledge. As a matter of fact, one of the most common stories I hear is that when they go to college and they begin to address this issue of the purpose of life, and they begin to take classes on religion, on philosophy, then this is the first time that they are studying or talking about or reflecting upon this issue. It wasn't really done in their house, or they weren't really active. There wasn't many teaching. So this is the only teaching. And they're obviously, if they're going to, and many of our Muslim youth are going to prestigious colleges, they respect this professor who has a PhD, who's at Columbia, who's at NYU or whatever, and they get indoctrinated. And I heard the story over and over again. It's because we are not doing our job. And from the time being, I mean, we just aren't innately, we have this belief in a God. And we want to believe that there is something bigger than ourselves. We don't want to rely on human beings. That's depressing. And that's why you hear the statement, and many of my relatives were, and Vietnam and other wars, you hear the statement that everyone is a believer during the at wartime, when things get very, very, very difficult, or when things are life and death. You throw up your hands. You want to believe that there's something. You don't want to depend on the pilot or Gyasi Mckinzie. That's very depressing, because I have limit, and I may not be fair, but alhamdulillah, this is again one of the uplifting things of believing in Islam, is that, or believing in a God, is that it gives you hope, and hope is powerful, and we this is what we teach, and so it's antithetical to teach people hopelessness and depression. And one last thing, I was listening to NPR maybe a couple years ago, and one person was saying how he was so depressed because when he embraced atheism, which is kind of ironic, but he embraced it. But he said, I just had to come to terms that I'm not going to see my grandmother once she dies, and that I'm not going to see these people again, and that I just lived life once and it'll be okay. But he mentioned, which was interesting, he was very truthful, that embracing atheism was a depressing thing. But he just thought, okay, but this is the truth. He didn't really obviously have that correct paradigm that you're talking about.
That's right. And let's talk about some reinforcing factors, especially in the young Muslims. So it's not the intellectual premise. They originate, the young Muslims, and it is not that they have the understanding of akhirah, but then there are hormonal surge. So the hormones are there. Most of the young people, they revolve to whatever is surrounding them. And moreover, now they are freedom. Right. Unlimited freedom. They can drink whatever they want. They can eat whatever they want. They don't have to wake up early in the morning. No more rituals. So these are the reinforcing factor leading them. Sometimes I say it's laziness, right? Because you have to discipline yourself if you remain. I mean, the young people are mostly very sincere and truthful. So when they become atheists, they can be truthful to themselves and really enjoy their life. Right. So that becomes kind of an easy way to go towards atheism. Okay, I don't believe in it, so I can live the way I can choose and pick from the ethics.
You have hit the nail right on the head. And if you again just do quick research, everything that you're saying, and we've heard them, been made by Muslims, youth who have went astray, Christians, and others as well. We live in an era, and especially youth, where we always want to say, you're not the boss of me. I'll dress the way I want. You don't tell me how to cut my hair. I don't want these restrictions. Don't give me dietary restrictions. This is foolish. I want to smoke what I want to smoke, intake what I want to intake. Don't. And you have this also on the far right with government and Big Brother, and no one wants to be told what to do. So one of the arguments for atheism, again, in reality, it's not this high level philosophical thing that is leading people to it, even though there are, but I would say it's actually illogical. But people are saying, hey, I want this freedom. And likewise, you said trauma. Sometimes parents were over restrictive and sometimes parents did things in the name of Islam or the name of religion that really hurt them. But that freedom, that restriction, the restriction, freedom from the restriction is one of the main premises for atheism. I can be my own man. This is what democracy teaches. This is what Western ideals teach, that you think for yourself. So I can pick and choose what I want. And so you're right. I've heard that over and over and over again. But this is a very arrogant. That's
right. And if you really look closely, how the young people, when they come out of high school, they want to go to some school far off from their parents, far off from their known people. When I was in Hawaii doing my fellowship in pain management, there was I saw that most of the Hawaiian young people want to go to California.
Mm.
or the mainland. And most of the mainland California coastal border, they want to come to Hawaii. Because you are so much far away from your parents, so you
Right.
can do whatever you want, and that's where they kind of end up in deviating towards it. Now, I mean, this is a very large topic. It has so many dimensions, how really we can understand atheism. As a matter of fact, one approach what I saw is not to look at these young people as deviated. I think we, the elder people, should be, I mean, you're young, but the elderly people, we should be looking at these young people as sportive, understanding that they're going through a phase.
Right.
Sooner their hormones will be better if our links with them are better. And sometimes I tell to these atheist friends is like, look, at least you are half of the Muslim, because la ilaha illallah, la ilaha, you believe. Now,
Right.
the
Right.
only small thing, illallah, you have to
Right.
know.
Right.
And if you really are intellectually seeking the truth, and you have reached a conclusion that la ilaha, I salute you.
Right.
You are in the right track, because now next is illallah, which
Right.
soon you will find. If you are the true seeker, you will find
Right.
Allah is not an inner thing. He is looking at your heart, that you are really looking for that.
Now
But
you go ahead.
yes, please.
No, I said you make a very beautiful point, because I believe when you study medicine, you study just the function of the kidneys, just that one thing. And I obviously don't have a medical background per se, but the little knowledge that I have, you the natural reaction is that there has to be a God. I mean, several things have come in our lives, and I've heard atheists say this, that some things they can't explain away. It certain even beauties and the way things function and the weather and how it's off now, it just makes you think that there must be a designer, there must be a creator. So I do agree with you, because you mentioned that they are going through a phase, and that eventually you will see that there is a God. You will eventually get there, but you may accept it or you may deny it, but you will. I mean, you will know that.
That's
It's
right.
upon you to confirm or to negate, but you'll come to that conclusion.
Since we want people to join our dialogue, I just want to come to the last point, because what is happening in the society, what is happening in their institutions, how the young people come across, what is happening, their stresses. That is one thing. But what is the role of the people who have the flag of Islam and Quran and Sunnah? Where we go wrong, where we actually have to modify ourselves. And sometimes I think the intolerance, the rigidity, the differences among us based on school of thoughts, uh, that also creates a reinforcing strong factor once that young man is on that path.
Right. And I think it's very important for us to be role models. Many times we say, do what I say and not what I do. Don't follow me, but follow what I say. And I think that's easier said than done. So I think we have to be role models, one. And then we have to be good parents by teaching our kids, spending time with them, and showing them that this is first and foremost, that and the importance of afterlife. Many times we've come here and we are seeking the American dream. We want our kids to flourish and to be great. And sometimes it seems as if we are promoting this life over the hereafter. And throughout the Quran, Allah tells us, Al-akhirah khayrun wal abqa. Over and over again, Allah is telling us that, hey, this is temporary, and which everyone agrees, even the atheists. This is temporary, and the akhirah, which we believe in, is forever. So I think those are just two things that we can do immediately that is not relatively complicated. Be a role model and teach and expose your children, even if we can't teach ours because we don't have that knowledge, then expose them. And now it's easier with digital halakas and lectures like we're doing now, and discussions. And I like that this is a discussion. We need more of those things, an exchange of thoughts. And this is part of the communication with the youth. We want to hear what you said. And I love that you mentioned that there's no stupid question. We want to hear. And we cannot deal with your issues if you don't bring them. So we want to hear them. Even if you think they sound foolish, it's good that they come. So that way we have an opportunity to address them.
Thank you, Sheikh. I mean, you elaborated very nice. What should we do? I mean, like as a parents, as a Muslims, how we encounter the young people. One thing that the differences among Muslim community. You see, back home in those Muslim countries, we don't realize that much that these differences make such a big, because we live in a homogeneous kind of group.
Right.
But here, our differences actually are projected very well.
Right.
So our overemphasis on furor and not talking too much about the basics of Islam, which in Quran is all basics, basically.
Right.
And the furor means not that they are not important.
Right.
They are important. The details are important. To do anything, you need the details.
Right.
But the thing is, maybe in public, maybe in dialogues, we should focus on basics.
I agree. Our problems are in the basic and not the furor, like you said, the secondary thing. I'm a firm believer in that, and that's the beauty of Islam.
Another thing, when I became the student of Deen, I mean, it's also kind of reverting to Islam. Believe me, most of the Muslims, they actually revert to Islam.
I've heard that a lot, mashallah.
It's not just a reverting from Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism. We Muslims need to revert to Islam.
Right.
I mean, we should do Shahada officially. Like, when the young people, they love each other and they got married. But then there are so many fights. They say, okay, let's do nikah again. That's what we have to do.
Mashallah.
Honestly, that's what we have to do. So I found that when we talk about my school of thought, actually, I'm talking about the understanding, fahm of deen by somebody in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one is deen and the other is its understanding. So in the past, there are elders, there are nice, pious people who understood deen in their own way, in their own backdrop. But over the last 1400 century, it is presented to us as deen, not as the fahm of deen, as deen. And then we are so strict about that we cannot tolerate anybody who is differing from us.
Right.
So as a result, what is happening is that they think that since this understanding was a human act.
Right.
And the atheism basic premise is that the God is human act. God did not create you, you created God. So since our mostly deen, the way we present is human activity, and we present it as deen, they extrapolate it to that level too. So I think we should say that this is my understanding, this is my elders' understanding, but this is Allah's message. And fortunately, we have the only fortunate on this planet who have authentic, clear Quran, uninterrupted, untouched, the way it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, how lucky it is. How big ni'mah is this?
Right.
We cannot say that this is human mental activity.
Right.
I think there are some questions coming. I see. Okay. So, Mr. Saad Khanzada, of note, this criticism of why bad things happen is only brought by New Age atheists. It didn't exist in the past creed of atheism because they understood why. I mean, there's not a question, probably an idea. So there's another question. Noreen Qadir, sister, said that how do you develop trust in youth to be able to say what's in their mind if they can't get over that Muslim community is very judgmental? Sister asked very good question.
Yes. Do you want to go first? And
No, no, please,
oh,
please.
okay.
We want to hear from you.
No, but that's a very beautiful, a very very good question. I think first of all, it starts at home. I try to tell my kids, for example, you know, that bring your ideas. I and share them. I may not agree with them, but at least I get a chance to try to convince you. And so I think starts at home and also in the masjid and the Muslim community um, have to welcome these ideas. We see that there are issues. We see that sometimes our kids, the way they dress, some things that they're doing, we see that there are issues. So um, we can proactively ask them to discuss this issue and to see their thoughts. And when we provide an answer and try to convince them, we shouldn't be, as Dr. Nasser mentioned, overcritical, or we shouldn't attack them. But we should say, hey, this is something I believe is dangerous because A, B, C. I think you should feel free to speak your mind, but don't attack the individual by saying, oh, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, what's wrong with you? Are you thinking? But you can be rigorous when it comes to answering, but not attacking the person. And also thank them for sharing it with you. And acknowledge that I know this must be hard. Just like when we have to say something to our boss or something that we feel uncomfortable about. I mean, acknowledging that will help them to continue. And once they don't see that you slap them or you beat them up or you curse them out, and unfortunately these things happen, then they'll be more readily open to share with you. But you may hear things that you don't like, and there may be some things that doesn't sound good, but it's a blessing that it's coming out, and it's a blessing that you have a chance to address it. That's a huge blessing because, like I said, sometimes you see it. For example, I don't want to mention anything too over controversial, but I will just mention, like, sometimes we see telltale signs, like, okay, maybe one of our youth is getting involved with homosexuality. And again, don't want to touch on that now, but however, this is a real contemporary issue. And so maybe you see that he's not opening up or she's not opening up, but when they are able to open up, now you could tell them about what Islam says, because their classmate, the society, and just last month, they're telling them a lot. So you want your opportunity to talk to them. So you don't want to beat them up too much or at
That's
all.
right. And Sheikh, you pointed out the rightly this homosexuality and gender confusion. As a matter of fact, this will be probably our next topic. We are touching those topics. We are not even talking about it, except for halal and haram. We don't talk about those things.
And you have to, because other people are talking. If you don't talk, someone else is talking to them, right?
Talking to them. And you're right. It is the parenting, the right parenting. As a matter of fact, at ICLI Forum, we are starting parenting workshops. And I personally believe the couple, when they are preparing for marriage, the real preparation is going through this workshop. If I'm given a chance, I make it mandatory. Okay, we will not do your nikah unless you go through this workshop.
That's a good idea, actually.
Because and this should be like one day whole workshop, like we do in different way, where we go through the sessions, basics, scientific skills as a parent you should have, as a spouse you should have, because that environment at home, that will create the trust, which sister asked. But the other problem which I found is that our mosques, mostly they are, they are built by fundraising and everybody chips in, but mostly they are managed by conservative part of our society. It's not inclusive.
Right.
And that is a big problem. I mean, they think that, okay, you can do whatever you want to do at home, but you are in the mosque. No, you cannot do it here. Okay. Yesterday I was talking to a brother who told me that we interviewed one imam. The board of trustee interviewed one imam, And the reason, he was very knowledgeable, very well versed, and all kinds of qualities he has. He came from another state. We interviewed them, and one of the brother asked him a question: how about including the women in the board of trustee? Or, and he said, yeah, why not? And only because of his saying yes, he was rejected.
Oh, wow.
Because
Wow.
the most of the time our mosques are and we are very lucky in ICLI where everybody is included. I mean, if your thoughts are a little different here and that, if you are a little on the even if you think the other person is wrong, we want to include the people in the mosque management, so that the people are not afraid to
Right.
creating, as our sister was mentioning, how we can manage the trust.
Right.
So we should be able to, it's not like we encourage wrong things, but at least we should remain in the inclusion, in the circle. Now there's another sister has mentioned that was about developing the trust. I think there was another question coming. uh, can we pull that and the next question? If there's more question, please we come up, because we have left with time. Sheikh, you want to kind of sum up?
Right. Well, I'll sum up, but I'll just comment on your statement. I think that's a very important point that you made, and we keep saying we value diversity and we want to be considered, and we see it as a virtue, but where's the diversity? Like you said, in the board? No, you want people who are women for sure. Their perspective may be different. You want people who are youth. You want people who are convert. You want diversity. That way, you can serve a broader spectrum. And the question that the sister asked, maybe I cannot answer it very well because of my background, but maybe you can because of your background. You want to be diverse, and we know that, and we're living in America, but we can't be hypocritical. Say diversity is good here, but over there, no, we don't want diversity. So, but to quickly sum up, I think if for those who may be struggling with it, and again, if you just look at atheism on a logical premise, I believe is illogical. And throughout the Quran, it's very beautiful. Allah talks about just reflecting on the changes in the weather patterns, the night and the day, and Allah tells us to think and to think and to think. And there's so much science in the Quran, and science that came out um, before now. Even you had professors, and I think Keith Miller from Canada. I think he's the one who studied about the embryo. That was enough. To convince him that this must be true. So I think if we just exercise our intellect, first of all, I think this will help the youth. Second of all, I think it, as I mentioned, atheism is quite depressing. You have this idea that nothing is greater than God. You have to rely on humans. That there's no true justice. People will get away. So uh, um, that's depressing. Likewise, you will never truly. The pursuit of happiness is also a something that can never really truly be attained, because this happiness here is temporary, and it can be pulled from you, and it doesn't last, and it's not perfect. And Allah talks about love in paradise, alcohol in paradise, marriage in paradise. He talks about all these things that we enjoy in this world, but at a perfect state. I mean, again, so this is something that is great, and at the end, it's a risk. So, believing in that will motivate you to be a good person, even if you thought that there was no life after death, even if there's no God. You will be giving back. You'll be adding value to society. So it is more logical to believe in God, and if we've read the Quran, it does build that faith. And this is the reason why you see people who are Christian, people who are Buddhist, accepting Islam. And this is the reason why you find that the fastest growing religion is Islam, not atheism. And you find again that the people who, a lot of times, the people who are embracing Islam, as you mentioned, I'll close with this, are people who say, I just want to do my own thing, or I don't need God anymore. God was there when we didn't have science. We couldn't ask this. So people did, they worship spirits, or they did this, or what have you, or they went to God. or they use God to for the sake of people being moral. And so you have this thought too as well, unfortunately, being dispersed. But I think if we are humble and realize who we are, and we read the Quran and realize who Allah is, then our natural conclusion will be there is a God, and this God is just and merciful, and that there is an hereafter. And still, the majority of people do believe in a hereafter. That makes sense.
Thank you, Sheikh. You nicely explained and summed up the story of atheism, how it is revolving, and what we can do about it. I think there was one question about from Saad Khanzada. To what extent do you think the youth adopting atheism is due to the colonized mindset of the youth and a subconscious inferiority complex conflict of Western Muslims today?
What a beautiful question. I think to what extent, to a great extent.
Yeah,
because this is whatever's been promoted by the West is being because they have the power. They have the power now. And the Prophet ﷺ prophesies this to happen, that we will be following the West and the Jews and Christians in particular, even with things that don't make sense. Even if they were to go in a lizard hole, we will follow behind them. So this was prophesied. The Prophet foresaw this. But very beautiful question. I'm glad you shared that, Brother Saad. I think that is to a great extent.
Yeah, and one of the reason is because Western society nowadays has glamorized few things, and they have made them bigger, like human rights, and the individual freedom, and the freedom of the woman. So there are so many things they are saying right as well, and behind that is basically this idea: this life is going to finish once we die. So once you are glamorized by those high ideals, the coupling part is coming beneath it. So that's how it is affecting our young generation. So I think this kind of dialogues, bringing people, and hopefully one day, Sheikh, we will like to invite you here, and let's have interaction with our young people, so that we can feel the questions, and we can see that where we are. Inshallah, I think there was one question that should we continue this same topic next month. We are going to look at that. What is the next topic? Maybe we will continue with this, or there are certain areas still left to be touched. But thank you, Ghaysi Mckinzie. Am I saying the right way now?
Yes, Gyasi.
Right. Sheikh, thank you very much for giving your valuable time. And thanks, audience, for listening to us. You can see it on our ICLI Facebook and YouTube channel. You can repeat this. And still, if there's questions, please forward it to ICLI, and we will hopefully be able to answer them. Thank you very much. Jazakallah.